Thank you.
He's scared.
It's okay, my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
It's all right. Hello.
Thanks.
It's all right, my pleasure. Thanks, sir. there we go, one of the first hazards of the day. Now, it hasn't punctured my tyre. I do have some of the slime inside the tyres. I put that in there only the other day. But anyway, look, so yeah, just got to be careful, make sure that I avoid any obvious, impediments, although hopefully the slime would do the trick anyway. Good afternoon folks, 21st Century Caveman here. Hope everybody's safe, hope everybody's well, and welcome to another video. Now, the main purpose of this video is to compare my current scooter, which is an Apollo Phantom, is a version 3, Mark 3, compared with the Emove Cruiser S. So I currently own the Apollo then, and the Emove Cruiser I've gifted to my son Jared. Now anyway, look, both of these are fantastic scooters, but there are distinct differences between them, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. I'm not going to go into the minutiae of every specification. I'm just going to give you the headline figures, alright, just so you can get an idea as to why I upgraded to the Apollo Phantom and gifted the Emove Cruiser to my son. So there she is then, and isn't she a beauty? So this is the Apollo Phantom 3 then, in other words version 3. Now what Apollo have done, they haven't introduced a new model every time they've done upgrades on it. What's happened basically, you've got the base model, the Apollo Phantom. They provided an upgrade kit that gives you the version 2, and that's what I bought. I bought version 2 from Ride and Glide. It had only done about 10 miles. It was a demonstration model, and I bought the version 3 upgrade kit, upgraded it myself, which gives rise to the current Phantom 3. Now I just want to give you the main differences between this and the Emove Cruiser. So first of all then, we'll talk about the battery. So in both cases the battery is under the deck. Now with this one here, the Phantom, it's a 52 volt 23.4 amp hour battery. The Emove Cruiser is also 52 volts, but it's a 30 amp hour battery. Therefore it's a bigger battery, it will hold more charge and should give you a greater range, and indeed that is the case. So the motors then. Now this scooter is far more powerful than the Emove Cruiser. This has two 1200 watt motors, that's the nominal power. Peak power is 2 times 1600 watts. So what's the difference then, nominal versus peak? Nominal is the sort of power you'd expect under normal circumstances. Peak is the maximum performance you'll get, perhaps on a sporadic basis every now and again. So on the Emove Cruiser you just have one 1000 watt brushless motor, and the motor on the Emove Cruiser is on the back. Now in terms of charging the batteries then, it takes about 7 to 8 hours for this Phantom. With the Emove Cruiser it takes longer, it takes 10 hours, presumably because it's a bigger battery. Now the two main questions people ask you when you tell them you have an electric scooter is, first of all, how fast does it go, and secondly, how much does it cost? So in terms of speed then, the manufacturer's quoted range for this is 40 mile an hour and 33 mile an hour for the Emove Cruiser. In reality, however, I've found that the actual speed I can get from this is about 35 mile an hour, and on the Emove Cruiser it was approximately 25 mile an hour. So in terms of range then, the Phantom is allegedly 45 miles and the Emove Cruiser is 62 miles. Now that's the manufacturer specifications, but the reality is far different. Now that will of course depend upon who's riding it. If you're a big lump like I am, then obviously the range will be less because the battery has to work harder. So the actual range for this then, I found it to be about 25 mile an hour, and that's that's being very generous with the throttle. On the Emove Cruiser I found that a realistic range is somewhere between 32 and 35 miles. This scooter then, the weight is approximately 35 kilos, which is considerably heavier than the Emove Cruiser, which comes in at 23 kilos. In terms of things like water resistance then, the Apollo, the Phantom, is rated IP54, whereas the Emove Cruiser is rated IPX6. So basically it's the next thing down to being waterproof, so that's excellent. In terms of suspension then, the Phantom here, look, it has 4 decent springs, 2 at the front and it has 2 at the back. On the Emove Cruiser it has 2 springs on the front and air shocks on the back. Now these springs make a massive difference to overall comfort in terms of, you know, the ride. This is a really smooth, comfortable scooter to use, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's a world apart from the Emove Cruiser. In fact, I'll go so far as to say, using a bit of poetic license, it's just like gliding on air. It really is a treat to ride. Now they both have 10-inch tyres, but there is a difference. These have tubes in, which is very disappointing really for a scooter of this specification, whereas the Emove Cruiser has tubeless tyres. So basically there is a much greater risk of punctures with these, and what I've done is to put some of that green slime in. So I've got one of the smaller bottles, basically put half of it in each, and the trip out today, within the first 5 minutes I did actually get a nail stuck in the back tyre, which just shows you the risk of just coming out anywhere really. But anyway, so you would need to consider using something like the slime in there, okay, just to give yourself that added protection and peace of mind. Now the spec for the Phantom then, maximum rider weight of 120 kilos, I weigh 113, no problem at all. Maximum weight for a rider for the Emove Cruiser is somewhere between 150 and 160 kilos. In terms of the braking then, so you have hydraulic brakes on both, but there is a difference. With this one you have the regenerative braking, so that's this bit here, look. So when you use this it will slow it down. It's not going to give you an emergency stop, but they are very effective, and also when you use these they also help to charge up the battery, so that's quite a nice little trick. There is another big change. This light here, look, is 2000 lumens on this Apollo. It's a decent one on the Emove Cruiser. I don't know how many lumens it is, but it's nowhere near as bright as this. So the other figure that people want to know about then is the cost. So this cost around about £2,000. You can of course pick them up in sales, that sort of stuff. It does vary, but very rarely will you save any more than say a couple of £100 on the manufacturer's recommended retail price. As far as the Emove Cruiser S is concerned, you can pick them up for about £1,200 to £1,300. So that's a comparison of the specifications of both scooters. But now what I want to talk to you about is real world differences. So all those specs, you compare them, it's all well and good, but how does that translate into riding this thing in the real world? So the first most notable difference then for me, as a very tall person on 6'4", was the height of the handlebars. Now these are an absolutely perfect height for a tall rider such as myself. The Emove Cruiser, despite the fact that the handlebars are adjustable even at maximum adjustability, if that's a proper word, they're nowhere near adequate for a very tall person such as myself. This is absolutely spot on for somebody like me, and you know, no modifications are required. As I say, I'm 6'4". Now with the Emove Cruiser, to get around that problem, I had to actually modify the stem and put some alternative handlebars on there. So with the Emove Cruiser then, what I had to do was to cut the stem using an angle grinder, and then I had to basically get some new handlebars, some new grips, and also I had to be rather ingenious about the way in which I attach the handlebar stem to the existing stem on the Cruiser. Now I did do a video about that, and it's something which will become available, and you have to really, because there wasn't a specific fitment available in order to do such a modification, I actually used a little bit of a hack. So that's quite an interesting one. Let me know in the comment section below if you want to see how I did that. And incidentally, that modification raised the handlebars on the Emove Cruiser by about 5 inches, which brought it up to an acceptable level for a tall person like myself. Now, the other thing which was particularly relevant to a big person like myself is the size of the deck. Now, this is a decent sized deck, don't get me wrong. I wear size 12 trainers. So, you know, if you want to, you can, with a bit of a squeeze, you can get 2 on there. But inevitably, what you end up doing is having 1 foot on the deck and having the other foot on this this backstop here, look. Okay. Now, initially, if you're not used to riding the scooter like that, it's a little bit uncomfortable, but you do get used to it. It's no biggie. However, my preference would be for a slightly longer deck. Now, whether or not that would actually give you a little bit more stability, I don't know. I'm not an engineer, but at the end of the day, I'm more than happy with the scooter as it is. But that would be a preference if I could change something. Obviously, there's a big difference in price, you know, £2,000 versus sort of £1,200, £1,300, £700 difference. Is the £700 price differential worth it? What I'd say is, if you're a bigger rider like myself, if you're taller and heavier, then I would say yes, it is. But, you know, I'll have to think about that. I mean, I've had this for several months now. I've used it quite a bit, and if you were to ask me initially whether or not this is worth an extra £700, I would have hesitated quite a bit. So it's taken me this amount of time to decide really whether or not it's worth the upgrade and the extra expenditure. Knowing what I know now, I would say as a much bigger person the answer is yes. However, if you're not as tall, if you're not as heavy as me, you want something that's going to be reliable, comfortable, with a very good range, then I don't think you need something like this. Okay, the Emove Cruiser is more than adequate. So I would also say that in terms of the build quality, this is probably better made than the Emove Cruiser. Now look, I'm not an engineer, as I say, that's just a bit of an educated guess really. It feels better put together, there are less rattles, less things shaking around. I think it's made better, but obviously that's quite subjective. And the main reason to say that is because on the Emove Cruiser S, one of the main things that really started to annoy me was the fact that the screws, or the bolts, the Allen bolts, they needed tightening a lot more regularly. In particular, the handlebars, you know, they used to rattle around a little bit, and also the deck on the Emove Cruiser, that became very, very noisy. And it's one of those things whereby, you know, unless you want to keep going back and having to attend to it every sort of like 2 or 3 days, you really need some thread locker on there. In fact, I'd say you need thread locker on something like this anyway. The acceleration is absolutely awesome. It's very smooth. There are no sort of vague areas. This is very smooth, and it's a really, really lovely ride. The other thing is that this is a very comfortable scooter. It's more comfortable to ride than the Emove Cruiser S. What you tend to find, if you made direct comparisons, the Emove Cruiser is a little bit jerky, and things like acceleration, it's not as good, it's a bit poorer. Okay, with the Phantom you actually end up gliding. With the Emove Cruiser you are just riding. Now, the other thing which is a difference and took a little bit of getting used to was the throttle. So on this one then, you have a thumb throttle, whereas on the Emove Cruiser you had a finger throttle. So basically, instead of using your thumb, you used your forefinger. To be honest with you, I think I prefer the finger throttle really, but this is really good. I mean, I've got no problems with it, you know, just personal preference. But you know, I'm more than happy with that. You know, it's perfectly satisfactory. I think the only other thing which I would say, which is a difference and becomes obvious when you start to ride these, is the fact that the display on the Phantom is much bigger. You know, you can see far more detail. It's a bigger display, but it's not really any clearer. So on a nice day like this, you know, the information is not particularly visible, to be honest with you. But When it's a little bit overcast, when there are a few more clouds in the sky, then it's certainly easier to read. Right, so let's wrap this video up then, shall we? So, is the Apollo Phantom a better scooter? And the answer, without doubt, is yes. I think it's better made, it's better put together, it has better performance, better specifications. Is it worth £700 or £800 more than the Emove Cruiser? That's more of a tricky one. I think if you're a really tall, large person like myself, so I'm 6'4", weigh 113 kilos, about 17.5 stone. I'm a big bloke, okay, so I need something which is going to haul my ass around. If you want something with comfort and you know you can do it in a nice way and have fun, then this Apollo Phantom, the version 3, is definitely better. Would I buy an Emove Cruiser? Yes, I would, and I think it represents better value for money than the Apollo Phantom if you're not a really big person like myself. So if you're not as tall, if you're not as heavy, then I think the Emove Cruiser is perfectly adequate. It has decent speed, it's got a much better range, and you know it's got a decent degree of comfort. Undoubtedly it's not as sophisticated, but then again it's £800 cheaper, isn't it? So yeah, they're my final thoughts then. I would go for a Phantom. I would pay £2 again if you're a big guy like myself, but if you're not, then I would certainly think that yeah, definitely the Emove Cruiser to my mind represents better value for money. So anyway, thank you very much indeed for watching. You take care. Bye bye.